Welcome to Ustick Road Church of the Nazarene in Caldwell, Idaho. This is the Sunday morning service. And now your speaker, Senior Pastor Brian Dyer.
Okay, we're at Luke chapter 15, starting at verse 11. This is Jesus explaining to the Pharisees and the leaders of the people what Christianity is all about. And there's some really good lessons that we can pull out of this for Father's Day. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them." There's a couple of problems here. I mean, it's not inherently glaring. It could be, but it doesn't have to necessarily be. He's asking for his inheritance, but you'll notice the father's still alive. No, most of the time you get an inheritance after the father passes. Although it's not, there is a precedence if, like, you got a really big estate, for the father to perhaps turn over the estate to the younger ones to run. So it's possible that this guy is saying, "Dad, why don't you take it easy for a while?" And he tries to sell him on a good sales pitch. "We're going to run the property for you. You just relax and take it easy." That sounds good. But yeah, I know. It depends on your kids, I suppose. A little scary, I'm going to put you in charge. But he says, "Give me my inheritance." So he divided his property between them. Fortunately, it was the younger son, not the older son, who was asking for the stuff, because otherwise it would have been a bigger hit because the older son got more. Because look at what he does. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for a distant country. That has some problems if he gave him property, because he took the property and went somewhere else. He must have sold it, which means he diminished the estate we talked about this morning in Sunday school. Or maybe the older son bought him off. "Look, just leave the property, take this, I'll give you some money." So everything he had, he took with him. So he traveled light, so he didn't take a whole lot of the dad's stuff. So he must have liquidated some things, is what I'm guessing. He set off for a distant country and there squandered the wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Okay, so that means that it wasn't a Jewish country, because Jews thought that pigs were unclean animals. And he's sitting there watching the pigs eat out of their pig trough. They're eating this stuff. And he looks down there and he thinks, "Man, I could take some of that pig food. But then somebody would probably get mad at me for eating the pig's corn. So I don't want to do that." So he's at a lower status than the pigs socially. It's pretty bad. He's in a bad place to be. You get the idea. Things have not gone well for him. He's taken his money. I imagine when he left, he didn't have this in mind. He probably thought, "Oh, I'm going to have a party. It's going to be great. And I've got all the dad's money. Look at that. It's just," and dad was so rich, he gave me all of this, And then all of a sudden, a famine, there's nothing, and there's no reserves. There's nothing to fall back on. And all of his money has already gone into the party. And all of his friends that he had are nowhere now to be found. When he came to his senses, I love that. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.'" This is when he's traveling on this journey. Let's imagine for a minute that he's supposed to take a week. I imagine that whole week he is walking and every day saying, "Father, I'm no longer to be called your son. Father, I'm really, really sorry." He's probably practicing this, and he has lots and lots of time to practice. I I don't know. As a father, when my girls would get in trouble, they would do something naughty, I would spank them, or discipline them, or put them in a timeout, or I don't know what I did. Whatever. You could ask them all of the cruel, horrible things I did to them when they were children. But I didn't find out until like just last year that the part they hated the most was when we got to sit down and debrief the situation. I would sit them down and I would say, okay, we're going to talk about what you did and why it was wrong and what you need to do differently. And they said that was the part they hated the most. They were just like, Dad, just beat me. Let's just get it over with. Don't talk about it. We know it was wrong. We did it. Just beat us, thrash us, and let us go. The interesting thing was I started practicing that. I remember when Brianna was, she wasn't yet walking. She was only like 6 months old. And I remember her doing something, and I would talk to her about it. And then she started walking. She got a little older, about a year. I remember her doing something over at Nancy's mom's house. I know she wasn't 2 yet, because she wasn't talking yet. I picked her up, and I took her into the bathroom, and I sat down on the side of the tub. I didn't spank her. Okay, you calm down. But I sat down with her, and I talked to her about what she had done wrong. And I explained it to her. You don't do that. Listen, I don't know what she was doing, playing with an electric cord or something. I don't know what it was. You're pulling on something, you're going to tear it up. So we don't do that. And I know that when I don't know how many of the words she understood, but I know this. I have a beagle that's got an IQ of about 50, and I can talk to that beagle, and that dog can understand a lot more of what I'm saying. And so I talk to my dog, and my dog responds to that. And I know that children have IQs. Your highest IQ of your life was before you were 2 years old. You are dumber now than then. Congratulations. Our IQ drops. A child learns how to count. They learn their name. They learn an entire language within about a year or two. If you could do that all of your life, you would be brilliant. So I know that kid has the ability to understand, and I was banking on it. So I would talk to them long before they could talk back. I'd tell them. And Nancy's mom once said, she said, what's he doing? Nancy said, he's talking to her. And she'll learn to hate it later. But anyway, he's rehearsing what he's going to say to his dad. He's rehearsing it over and over again. And he's probably rehearsing what his father's going to say back. But you guys ever have those conversations? They're horrible. You have the conversation. I'm going to say this. She's going to say this. I'll put it into the wife. She's going to say this. I'm going to say this. Then she's going to say this. I think I'm not going to say that. I think I'm going to say this instead of that, because that would not go well. I'm going to say this instead. And then she's going to say this, and that's not going to go well either. Okay, sometimes it doesn't look like there's any good answer to it. You're trying to come up with it in every answer. It's like everything I say, there's something wrong. It's like there's no easy out. He's rehearsing this, going to his dad, and he knows that he's really done something rotten. I mean, everything he's done has been horrible. And so he's probably anticipating, what's Dad going to say? He might just throw me right off the property. I don't know if he's going to even let me finish my sentence. Father. And so he's there talking, and his dad barely lets him finish it. That much he had right. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him, what's going on? Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has come back and safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you. And just what a whiner. I've been slaving for you. For you. It wasn't for himself. I've been slaving for you. And never disobeyed your orders. What a good boy. Yet you never even gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Glory to God. What a testimony we have to the grace of our Father. Lord, I praise you for your grace and your mercy, and I pray that you would help us to take from this passage what you have for us this morning. I pray that you would speak to us as leaders in our homes and in our community, as people who should set an example for others to follow. I pray that we would be quick to hear your word and through the power of your Holy Spirit to be blessed and to be a blessing. I, the speaker behind the cross, Lord, may your word, not mine, prevail in Jesus' name. Amen. One of the things that I think, when Nancy and I were young and we were dating, I couldn't wait to be around her. Man, we were just in love. You know, we were just, and I couldn't wait. And when we got married, it was just wonderful bliss, just happy, so happy. Not all the time. We still fought a lot, don't misunderstand me. But we were so happy to be married and everything. And as the years went on, we said, well, things are going so well. What should we do to celebrate? And we said, oh, I know. Let's give birth to a child. It's a trap. It's a trap. They talk back. They eat all the time. They make messes all the time. You know, and you think, we're going to give birth to a child because we sleep too much. We need somebody to scream in the middle of the night so that we can't sleep. And then we need somebody to always be constantly making a mess everywhere. You know, I look at pictures of our house before we had children, and everything was exactly where you wanted it. We're looking forward to those days again. Maybe, I'm not sure, but I think that when that time comes, we may not enjoy it as much. Our girls are growing up now. We're missing them as babies. But, you know, when you have children, that's the dumbest idea ever. For any kind, I call them little resource suckers. That's what I call them. They take your time, they take your money, they take your energy, and then when they get old enough, they tell you how much they hate you for it. As they grow up, the saying is, God wanted us to have children so that when they become teenagers, then they can deny that we exist. You know, we could get that feeling. But the truth is, we still wanted to have children, and even after having one, we had another. After having one. Donna, that's crazy. You know, you have the first one, you know better now, and then you still go on, Janet, and have another. You didn't learn the lesson 4 times. God bless you. I would call it temporary insanity, but that had to last at least 4 years. You know, why? I mean, why do we have kids? Why do we have kids? Neurotic compulsion, you can't help yourself. It's just, no. When we had our daughters, I tell you what, before Brianna was born and Danielle as well, I loved them. Before they were ever born, I was madly in love with that little person to come. I couldn't wait till they were born. And then when they were born, they redefined the entire world. Who you are, how you look at everything. You thought you loved your spouse. And indeed, that love will transcend. You have to love your spouse at least as more than your children. Because one day I know that the kids are going to fly the coop, and it's going to be Nancy and I again. And if we haven't taken care of this relationship, everything else falls apart. But man, you find that there's somebody in your life now that you would readily sacrifice your own life for. And you didn't know that you could love anybody that much. What an incredible opportunity God gives us as parents. I mean, really, what a blessing. And it also gave me a little bit of a glimpse, perhaps, as to how God looks at us. When he created mankind, he didn't just have a goldfish in a bowl. He was creating sons and daughters that he was going to have a relationship with. That's why mankind was created. God says, I'm going to have these children who are going to love me, and I'm going to love them. That's the example that we have in the Scripture. That's the reason, you know, there's a growing trend in a lot of the churches to eliminate the references to God as Father. And I'm resistant to that. I understand the reasoning behind it. Some people have terrible fathers, and so they go, don't call God a father because that's going to hurt somebody's feelings, and they don't understand. And I understand that. But for me, I love the reference to God as Father because it gives me a model for me to understand who I'm supposed to be. It tells me, not that I have to model God after me, but I need to model myself after God. And so I think that we kind of look at that a little bit backwards. But it gives us an understanding of God's relationship with us and why he would send his son Jesus Christ to die for us and be willing to pay such a huge price for our redemption, because he does love us as his very own children. That's phenomenal, guys. That's the reason we were created, is to be in relationship with God. I found this, I don't know if you would call it a poem or writing. At 4 years old, father, my daddy can do anything. A 7-year-old, my dad knows a lot, a whole lot. 8 years old, my father doesn't quite know everything. At 12 years old, oh, well, naturally, father doesn't know everything. I like the transition from dad to father, you know. At 14, father, hopelessly old-fashioned. 21, oh, that man is out of date. What did you expect? 25, he knows a little bit about it, but not much. At 30, must find out what dad thinks about it. At 35, a little patience. Let's get dad's meaning first. At 50, what would dad have thought about it? At 60, my dad knew literally everything. At 65, I wish I could talk it over with dad once more. We are a society searching for a model father. I probably all of us read through that too, going, yup. The prodigal son gives us a great illustration of what a father looks like. So let's pull a few of the lessons from him this morning is what we're going to do. Number one, a good dad teaches the truth from infancy up. I went to a seminar one time for teenagers, and they said, okay, your kid wants a pair of Nike tennis shoes, and he will not settle for a name brand. You don't have any money, but he wants Nike. And the Nike shoes are $60. The store brand is $12. Do you get him the store brand or do you go for the Nike? And he throws a fit if you don't get him the shoes he wants. They said, okay, so we're going to vote. And they said, so everybody who says that you get him the Nike, go over to the right side of the room. So everybody went over to the right side of the room. And then they said, excuse me, I'm sorry. You get him the Nike, or do you get him the name brand, you know, the store brand? Everybody went to the store brand, except for me, because I like to be different and defiant. And so I went over to the Nike side. And they said, you think you should get him those store brand and the name brand and when he's throwing a fit? And I said, absolutely. I said, if you haven't taught him anything before 16 years old, give up. I said, you can't start trying to fix him now. If you haven't taught that from childhood, you got nothing left. Just go on and keep peace in the house, sell your car, buy him his tennis shoes. You know, the truth of the matter is you start at the beginning. At the beginning. If you wait, the longer it gets. I love it when people come to me and go, well, my little boy, he's 7 years old, but he's so strong, and I just can't get him to do anything. He just defies me, and he's so strong already. And I go, what do you think? He's going to get smaller? He's going to get bigger. You either win the battles now or you lose the battles forever. It's a decision for you to make. It's a decision for you to make, and that's all made all the way through. My grandmother told me the story. I just expect it's just that, a story. This man was walking with his son who had been to prison, and the son was walking along with his dad, and he says, Dad, look at this little twiglet of a tree. He said, would you bend that over for me? And the dad says, sure. He bends it, steps on it, knocks it down. I don't know why they're just destructive in that part of the sea. Yeah, part of our destruction of our ozone. That's how they're about. And as they walk along, they see a little sapling about 3 or 4 feet long. He says, Dad, bend that one over. And the dad bends it over. And as they walk along, they get to a tree that's about 5 feet tall. He says, Dad, bend that one over. And the dad grabs it and bends it, but it's really hard. As he goes along, he reaches the next tree. It's a big, huge tree. He says, Dad, bend that one over. And he says, I can't bend that one, son. It's much too large. He said, that was me. He said, you could have trained me early on, but you waited, and you waited too long. You know, Jesus knows who he's talking to. He's talking to the Jews who believe that from the very birth, you start teaching a child in the way that they should go. And I just want to enforce that for you, especially you people who still have young ones, or, you know, for your grandkids, I suppose. You know, you start when they're little. You start when they're little. And you don't compromise anything. You don't compromise anything. Kids love you. They will love you for it. I was talking to a friend of ours, this young lady, and she said, well, my husband and I, we really can't go anywhere because we don't have anybody to watch our kids, our daughter. I said, I would love to watch your daughter for you. I said, anytime I will love her. I have a great time with her. Give it to me, I'll watch her. I said, but I'll spank her. I said, if she does anything wrong, I'll spank her. I said, if she comes home and says, Pastor Brian beat me like a rug, she might be telling you the truth. I said, don't necessarily rule it out. I said, because if I can't get her to comply and to be pleasant and to be respectful when I have her, I won't want her. I won't want her, and that will destroy our relationship. So we have to establish a respectful relationship early on so that I can enjoy forever. I said, we can have a great relationship then, and she could come over and spend time at my house. And if I can't get her to comply, I don't want to be around her, And that's how it is with everybody. One of the tests that we read in a book early on was, do other people enjoy your children? Because everybody enjoys their own kids. You can have the worst kid ever, and you go, well, he's not perfect, but he's a good boy. He's not a good boy. He's a bad boy. You just don't see it. The question is, do other people enjoy your children? If other people enjoy your children, and I'm not talking about their grandparents. Grandparents are messed up. You don't use them as a litmus test. Don't say grandma and grandpa like them. Of course, grandma and grandpa like them. People who love them at that level are always going to love them. We had a gal in our church years ago. We were talking to this older couple, and she said he just loves that grandkid of his. He just spoils him rotten. He'd give him a hammer and a plate glass window if he wanted it. And the old man says, what? He couldn't hear all that well. She said, I said you'd give him a plate glass window and a hammer if he wanted it. He said, well, sure I would. That's what grandpas are supposed to do. But do other people around you say, that's a good kid, man, he's respectful. I love being around your children because they're so kind, they're so polite, they're so good, they're so whatever it is, a positive adjective. Train them from the infancy up. This dad shows us that. Take that one to heart if you can. This dad has respect for their individual autonomy. I put a cookie cutter on there. He understood they were not cookie cutters. Man, kids are different. I thought after we had the first one, the second one would be easy. It's like, well, we got that first one down. Now we know what we did wrong. And then we found out that they were nothing alike. My favorite illustration of that is Brianna. When we would do something to discipline her, if she did something really bad, she did something easy, we'd swat her. If she did something really bad, we put her in a timeout. She hated being in timeouts. Hated it. It was terrible for her. It was torture. Danielle, on the other hand, Nancy put her in a timeout. She was about 5, 6 years old. And then she went in. She says, okay, you've been in your timeout for 5 minutes. And she was going in to set her free from her bondage in her bedroom. And she's sitting on her bed, and she has a sock on either hand. And she's having her little sock puppet show. And Nancy says, you can come out of your bedroom now. And Danielle says, can I have 5 more minutes? That was her last time out. Yeah. We didn't do timeouts. A good father has to understand that every child is not alike. And this father had to understand the younger son was not the older son. And you have to treat people differently depending upon who they are, their frame of reference. It's totally different for each and every single one of us. None of us think identical to each other. And we need to respect that about one another, both as in a parental line and then even just in our day-to-day living. What you can say to one person, you can't to another. Respect for individual autonomy. He won't stand in the consequences. A good father doesn't stand in the consequences of their actions. The younger son takes the stuff, the father gives it to him, and then he goes out and he lives this riotous living, and then he gets really destitute, and things are really going bad for him. And the father lets him go that route. But he doesn't intuitively just run out there and rescue him when he finds out things go bad. That's hard. It is hard to allow people that we love to go through difficult times. It is hard to let somebody go through a spot where they're inconvenienced and they're having a difficult situation and not want to. I want to. Man, I don't want my daughters to ever have to have anything wrong. And it's a bad thing to just continually rescue them. Why? Because they learn the same way you learned. You remember those dumb things you did? We could make a list. But we've all got them. And we had to learn from those things. And your kids are going to have to learn from those things too. The people that you love have to learn the same way. I put the world disciplines those who are not self-disciplined. But when we do something that's wrong, or when we sow wild oats and you get those seeds, you're gonna reap those things. So we have to respect and love one another enough sometimes to let people run the course of their own actions and to allow them to reap the harvest of what they sow. God does, and we follow his model. I think that this dad sets us a good lesson plan there. But he does have a love that never gives up. That child is off, and he's doing bad things, and he is not following the Lord. I love this picture. That's a frog's being eaten by that stork, and he's got him by the throat, so he can't eat him. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up. You know, man, praying for people that you love is always worthwhile. Continuing to invest. You never retract that love. They know that you love them. They're doing something wrong? Yeah, you're doing something that's wrong. I still love you so much I'd die for you in a second. That's never retracted. It's never compromised. It's never negotiable. That younger son knew that when everything went bad, Dad was still his best hope. That was still the place he was going to go. And he turned around in spite of all that he'd done wrong and all that he'd messed up. He still went back to Dad. There was no other hope. There was no other option. That was the one. He also knew this about Dad. Dad is forgiving. A good father's been forgiven, especially as a Christian, friends. We've been forgiven for all the things that we've done wrong. And through Jesus Christ, we have forgiveness and hope. Man, how can we not be a forgiving and hopeful people? How can we be anything but people who are masked in forgiveness? I mean, it should be natural. Somebody does something wrong to you, you're not the person who walks around nursing a grudge. Well, I'm never going to let that go. Well, no, that's not you. That's not you. Now, don't misunderstand me. If somebody does something that's wrong, you don't necessarily put yourself back into a position where you're going to agitate that scenario or victimize yourself or the other person again. But you don't walk around hating them and being angry about it. Do you follow that? You know, if I know that Elaine steals a lot, I'm not going to make her the church treasurer. Because that wouldn't be good for her or me, and Chad would be so sad he lost his job. So there's an element where you respect who a person is. There are people that I have relationships with that are not necessarily good people. Do you follow that? They might be people you couldn't trust. They may have a drug problem. They may have some other kind of issue in their life where you shouldn't trust them. You shouldn't trust them. So I don't trust them. I don't trust them, but you're still friends with them. I love them. I still love them. To me, as I go, that's what we love for our children. We just love them. As a good dad, we love them. And you go, well, they do stupid things. Well, of course they do. They're your kid. They're not going to get past that. It's all of us. We all got something goofy about us, but you just love them. And when they do something wrong, you don't explain it. You don't cover it up. You don't try to pretend that it's not something that's wrong. You don't minimize it, but you love them in the middle of it. I don't agree with your life. I don't agree with half of the world's lifestyles. It doesn't make any difference. I can still love them. That's not a contingency. Aren't you glad that Jesus Christ didn't love us when we were just perfect already? If that were the case, a lot of us would still be without hope. Because I haven't crossed that line yet. I'm hoping by the time I hit 60, I'll have everything figured out. Gives me another few more years, but you guys over 60, you've got it, I'm sure. But I should have it within the next 4 years. I'm closing in on it. Yeah, hope. Forgiving. What else? One more thing about this guy. He celebrated the success. He celebrated the success. It's a funny thing because we are, as a culture, we start with the presupposition of an A, and then we rip things down to get down to the grade level that you get. Do you follow? When you were in school, the teacher didn't have to say, you did so great, you get an A. She had to say, you would have gotten an A, but you messed these things up. We become prone to pick out the things that are wrong rather than the things that are right. It's the way that we're kind of hardwired. We look for the negative, not for the positive. So we're finding the things that are messed up. This is messed up, so it's not an A. Now we knock it down to a B. It was a little more messed up than that. We knock it down to a C. You know what I mean? And so we're trying to find the things that are wrong rather than the things that are right. We went to a competition on the district once. They had one of those zone things, and the critiques came back, and they had these college students do the critiques, and they were so horrible. The kids played their musical instruments, and they would critique them and say, you did this and this and this and this. The kids were college students, and all they wrote was the negative stuff. All they wrote was the negative stuff. Well, you messed up this, you messed up this, you messed up this. There was nothing that they put down positive, nothing. And then they said, you did an excellent job. Not superior, but excellent. And I went, why did they give them an excellent? There was nothing there that justified giving them an excellent. If you have all of these negative criticisms, I would have given them like a terrible, horrible, I wish I could give you an F, but they don't allow this on the sheet. I have to, so I've got to say, so you're, I wish you were never here. My ears are still hurting. From the critiques they gave them, they were so negative. And so I called up the district leader later that week, and I said, listen, you got to cut these kids some slack. Tell them something they did right. If they got an excellent, tell them why it's an excellent. Rather than tell them why it's not a superior, tell them why it's not a poor. Start at the bottom and work your way up. This is why I think you're so great. You didn't quite attain the uppermost level, but man, you're fantastic. You are really sensational. When we do that, when we celebrate the things that they do right, how horrible it is if we felt like only the people around us were always telling us the things we did wrong. The world does that for us. They tell us all the things that we get wrong. But God loves us. He loves us so much. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. God started seeing all of the positive things in our lives long before anybody else could see them, long before I could see them. God was already telling me, boy, you got this right, you got this right. And by the grace of God, I had people in my church who were building me up, who were telling me, boy, you do good things. You have skill sets. And some of them, I know some of you I've told because you've been around long enough to hear all my stories. But when I was young, I got into a play at church. I was a shepherd. And so I remember my line, prepare to be wowed. Look, a star. That was my line, yeah. And so that was my line at the end of the play. And then I got into, as I got older, I got into play at school. They were doing Charlie Brown, and I was Charlie Brown. Yeah, Nancy says it still fits. And so I got the part, and then the pastor's granddaughter was in the play, and so everybody came. I don't know if they necessarily would have come for me, but they came because she was in the play, and I had the lead part. They probably would have come. Some would have come for me anyway. But then afterwards, this guy came up to me. I was not yet a professing Christian. My family was a little bit dysfunctional. That's saying my family put the fun in dysfunctional. So this guy came up to me and he said, well, first, they did a play at church. And they said, Brian, we want you in this play at church. And I said, it's my gig. It's the thing I like to do. Of course I'll do it. And so they put me into the part, and they gave me a lead part, so that, because they knew I could memorize and stuff. And then afterwards, this fella comes up and he goes, man, wow, what a memory you have. You just grab onto stuff and hang on to it. Boy, that's brilliant. You should be on our church quiz team. You know how well you would do at that. Boy, we really want you on that quiz team. And I said, well, I'll try it, but if I hate it, I'm going to quit. Fair enough. I'll give it a try, but I didn't know if I really wanted to do it yet. And so I went ahead and I got on the church quiz team. And the first year there, we were studying on the book of John. We were studying the book of John. And I went in the first week. We had our practice. And we went through the first few verses. And we went through, I think we may have gone through the first chapter. Then the next week, we went into chapter 2. And I told the Sunday school teacher that it was my teacher. I said, I'm going to quit. She said, what? I said, I can't do it. She said, well, what's wrong? I said, you guys are moving too fast. I said, I can't keep up. I haven't even finished memorizing all of chapter 1 yet. And we're on to chapter 2. And she said, Brian, you don't have to memorize the whole book. We're just studying it. You just have to memorize the memory verses. And I said, oh, man, I can do that. So I loved it. But I had people who loved me enough, seeing this kid who really didn't have all of his act together yet, still doing a lot of things wrong, making a lot of mistakes, that said, man, I see something in you. Wow. You know how redemptive that is? We have the power of life and death in our voices, and we so seldom use it for the purpose God intended. Really just not enough. A good dad understands that. He celebrates this son who has come home. He celebrates what God is already and has been doing. That's a positive thing for us, an encouragement for us as fathers. And as moms, for those of you too, honestly, it's not exclusive to one gender or another.
Thanks for joining us today. You can find Ustick Road Church of the Nazarene on the web at usticknaz.org and on many social media sites at usticknaz. Thanks, and God bless.